Now, welcome to, let's call it a midweek ramble. There's not much in the way of news today, so news from Naboo will be postponed till tomorrow, I'm assuming.
Sure, if there's news tomorrow.
Anyway, what we're going to talk about today is, I've seen a lot of people talking about Andor being, well, maybe not a lot of people, but enough people where it's caused a stir, I suppose. Talking about Andor not being very Star Wars-like, talking about Andor being bad for Star Wars. That it kind of takes your classic hero tropes of good versus evil and twists them and all of these things, and that's not very Star Wars-like.
Star Wars has traditionally been a lot more black and white. Straight cut good versus straight cut, those are the bad guys, those are evil. But we're seeing Andor is the gray. Not the gray Jedi, but just
Don't even say that word.
morally
Words.
ambiguous characters.
Yeah, more than even that. I mean, you have people like Luthen or Cinta, and let's play assume Cinta, and spoilers for Andor, I guess, if you haven't seen it, and you should go see it, it's really good. Cinta in episode, 6, the heist episode, presumably kills some people. We're going to assume she does.
She totally did.
I think
question she killed those people.
Yeah, I know there's still debate. There's people who are going to argue no. For the sake of argument, let's just assume she did. Let's assume that's a cut and dry, that's what happened thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are the rebels. These are the good guys. These are things that you wouldn't see out of Luke Skywalker. You wouldn't even see out of Han Solo, even though he's done some shady things too. I mean, until this, I think maybe one of the shadier things we had seen in Star Wars, other than Cassian and Rogue One. I mean, back in the original trilogy, the shadiest thing we see, and it's not really that bad, is Han shooting Greedo first, initially, in the first cut of the movie. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was kind of Greedo's holding a gun to him and all these things. It's not exactly cold blood, but it is kind of, wow. Here's one of our heroes just shooting a guy and casually walking out of a bar and flipping a coin to the bartender. So, that was about as gray as we ever saw out of Star Wars.
I like the new gray, though, in a way, because it's more grounded.
Do you think it just fits this kind of time better? Not necessarily the political landscape. I'm not talking about that, but just people expect that more out of entertainment.
I think entertainment follows the landscape. The best example I can give of that is the Batman movies. I mean, there's one every,
every
few
2 years or something like that,
and
with a new Batman.
Every one that changes, I think, further reflects the society that it's made for, the movie.
So you're saying entertainment should reflect modern society?
It doesn't necessarily 100% become a mirror to it, but the times are definitely shown. The old Michael Keaton Batman movies definitely reflected they were darker, they had a serious tone, and then as they went on, they got kind of goofy because I think movies started getting a little more.
The 90s were goofy.
Little goofy.
They felt
right?
a little goofy, right?
You move into the Christian Bale ones, and we're back to the dark and gritty because that's what everyone wanted and we move into the Joker where we're studying like a mental illness as well as the crazy impacts on society of like mass hysteria and stuff, and I think that goes with
reflects things in them. Sure, I think the argument with the reflection of the modern world is when you start getting into not necessarily what the world is, what's happening in the world, as much as your view of what you want the world to be.
I think it's a tonal thing as well.
Yeah,
and
plus
Andor
it depends on
has moved tonally into the time period.
I agree. I think Andor is a result of realizing that entertainment... I mean, the Game of Thrones syndrome, right? Game of Thrones kind of changed the game, no pun intended. It made people really enjoy that there isn't always like, oh, that's the person I root for, that's the person I root against. It kind of, muddied the water, if you will.
Right, because not everyone is good or straight good.
No one is. No one is like 100% good and 100% evil.
I mean, even Ned Stark was tarnished.
Yeah, he had a little bit. I mean, he was about as good as anybody in that show, and then spoiler alert, he gets killed at the end of season 1, and it's shocking because you don't expect that. He was supposed to get out of that situation and save the day. That's what happens in those type of shows, right?
Right, but it doesn't always happen, and they're showing us that. And I think that this tone, I think it was good for Star Wars. We needed to see more to the universe than just everyone in the universe is either good or evil. There are no people in between.
The bounty hunters are always in between.
Even bounty hunters are barely in between.
They're usually
Some of them are
bad.
like, I take the bad guy bounties, and the other ones are like, I take the good bounties. They were even divided.
I mean, even in The Mandalorian, it's kind of presumed he's, I don't think a bad guy, but he's definitely on the darker side. I don't mean of the Force, but I mean...
people in, when he says, I could bring you in...
warm or cold, yeah.
Yeah, if they're a
Good
decent
opening line
folk,
for him.
he brings them in alive.
Yeah, that scene kind of reminds me of the introduction of Han, where you get that baseline, this is who the guy is. Very well done. But anyway, don't make me ramble about that for an hour.
But seeing a character like Cinta, and seeing that the rebellion actually made her a worse person.
Worse than she was. Worse than the Empire made
she
her
was
in a
a
way.
person
Though the
suffering.
Empire is still responsible
The
for
Empire
making her.
killed her family, but you can see her progression along the way. After she does that dirty deed for the sake of the rebellion, for the sake of doing the right thing, we see her later. She's not even paying attention to her girlfriend anymore.
Yeah, she's pushing Vel even further away.
She's pushing Vel away.
She's a monster and she knows it.
She's stabbing people in an alley. We don't know if her job was to go and stab that guy. She did it because she wanted to.
Yeah.
Because the rebellion has awakened almost a bloodthirstiness inside of her now. The seeking of revenge is ultimately going to destroy her.
Yeah, I think the Luthen speech...
But it's for the sake of good.
Yeah, but I think the Luthen speech in many ways kind of applies to her, where you've lost your soul. Like, there's no coming back from killing a child for any reason. And, I mean, again, assuming that's what she did. Like, she killed unarmed civilians in a war sense. And not just that, but a child. Again, no coming back. Like, it's like Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, killing, a room full of children. Yes, he gets redemption later on from his son in Return of the Jedi, but he's never going to be forgiven.
His son hasn't seen the Hollows.
Well, probably doesn't want to see those.
Right, but Cinda's a perfect example of that. Even Cassian. He's throwing himself away to Luthen's mercy at the end.
Sorry, we have cats again intruding upon our...
Right up to the microphone.
Right up to the microphone, wants to have his say.
I just wish he would meow, but he won't.
No, he won't. Anyway, we'll just deal with it, as we always do.
But, I mean, Cassian changed for the rebellion as well, but he actually was changing in the better.
In a way, yeah. But we also know he's going to do shady things, right? We know he's not a good person to start with. I mean, he had his hand forced when he initially, he accidentally kills one security officer and then makes the conscious choice to kill the other. Mm-hmm. That's not a good thing.
But that's our hero.
Yeah, but it's our protagonist. I don't know that he's a hero. That's where the Andor series is kind of goes against traditional Star Wars. We can say Luke is a hero. We can even say Han is a hero, even though we know he has a shady past. We can say Leia is a hero. Lando's a hero. Some of these characters have shady pasts, right? But they're heroes. Andor isn't a hero. He's a protagonist. He's the guy He's
a guy who gets things done.
He is the guy who gets things done. He's necessary, right? That's what the show kind of tells us. It's necessary sometimes for the good guys to do some really bad things, which is an odd message for Star Wars, which has always been about hope is going to save the day. We just have faith in yourself and you fight the bad guys and you win eventually.
But in this show, we are showing all of the hero characters doing things that we're like, why? I mean, Mon's letting her daughter, pretty much selling out her daughter to protect herself. And, she is protecting the family.
We don't even get a Ned Stark in this show.
No.
Not that one guy we're like, oh, yeah, that's the guy who...
Marva.
Okay. Even though, Marva's implied to be doing sketchy things in the past, though, but...
Well, she wasn't doing sketchy things. She was a salvager. She was just
Okay, you're right.
Which I guess was illegal and all, but...
it's a gray area.
You're going to look at the fact that she kidnapped a child?
Yeah, that's a little... Him. Yes. I've heard a lot of people kind of upset about that she kidnapped him, but what else were you going to do with him?
Well,
leave him there?
According to any information they had on the planet, everyone there should have been dead.
True.
Finding a lone child and knowing that they have a limited time in which to get back off the planet, they did save his life in their eyes, and in fact, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, he probably would have been. I'm assuming the others were killed, but for some reason Cassian thinks his sister is alive, but Marva definitely thinks she isn't.
Right. I think he's just desperately reaching out for a family and didn't want to look at the family he had.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the whole sister thing could just be a subtle way of saying he's looking in the wrong place for the family he already has.
Mm-hmm. But I think this depth cannot be bad for Star Wars.
I don't think it's bad. I think there are people who are... I mean, there are definitely people turned off by it. There are a portion of the fan base, and I'm not saying you're wrong, and I'm not saying I'm right, but there's certainly a portion of the fan base who has said this is not Star Wars for them. And I get it. I've said it before. I get it. I understand why you feel that way. And... Again, is it a reflection of the modern world? Is it the Game of Thrones syndrome where that's what people expect nowadays? No one wants to see good versus evil. I don't know. I mean, I would love a good classic good versus evil story. I enjoyed those kind of things.
Right. We just have to get somebody who will write that.
Yeah.
I mean, Dave Filoni usually writes that type of thing.
We've got Star Wars is more, yeah.
Soon. Ahsoka's coming. He writes his traditional good versus bad. I think even Skeleton Crew will be good versus bad. This one show showing you the gray... isn't the standard. It's the exception.
Yeah, and it's a good exception. I agree with that. That's a good way to put it. I don't think this is what Star Wars now becomes.
No, Star Wars isn't all going to change now and everything will be Andor.
Especially because it's not getting the ratings, let's be honest. It exploded, and it still has a chance. I'd say some things don't initially catch fire. It could still catch fire. Maybe season 2 is even better and it blows up.
Well, once they bring back Alan Tudyk and he's in all the promotional material, everyone's like, "Oh, K2."
Yeah, K2, the funny guy.
The funny guy. Let's talk about K2. Once they bring him in, we don't know. Maybe people will be back. Maybe him being in it will somehow be enough to feel like Star Wars again.
Maybe
because
that levity that Star Wars, I don't think always intentionally has. I think that was one of the problems with the sequels, is it intentionally kind of put levity in there. I mean, I guess the prequels, Episode 1 especially, had its moments with Jar Jar, but I don't think Star Wars has ever intentionally tried to be funny, and there were certainly moments in the sequels that intentionally tried to be funny that didn't work.
Intentionally.
Yeah.
They pushed it a little too far.
But no, I certainly don't think Andor will be or should be the standard. Again, had it been ultra successful, maybe they rethink their whole approach and everything becomes,
Well, and it doesn't hurt to have a different storytelling now and again. I mean, they always did those shorts, those little comedic one-offs, and I'm not saying, they ruined Star Wars. They're just something different.
No, we've talked about that before. If a franchise is going to endure, you do have to explore multiple avenues. What did the MCU do? Decided to do subgenres. Not every one of their movies, well, if you dig deep enough, they all kind of feel the same. But on the surface, they all have a different feel to them. Captain America Winter Soldier, much different than Ant-Man, right?
Much different.
Much different. Yet, at their heart, they're still superhero stories.
Absolutely.
So Star Wars needs to, at the heart, I think Andor is still Star Wars, right? It still very much is Star Wars. I'd argue it's more Star Wars than Star Wars is sometimes, about the true fight of good versus evil. It just takes a whole different form.
Well, it's crazy, though, like you were saying with maybe that's just an across-genre type thing. I mean, in your superhero genres, in your MCU, one of the least liked villains for some reason is Baron Zemo, and he is the most, he could have been an Andor.
He's the most Andor-like villain.
He is the Andor villain in the MCU.
It's kind of funny, yeah.
Because you look at him and and you don't
He's not
understand. You're like,
bad
I don't get
guy
it.
per se, yeah.
He's seeking revenge. He's your Cinta. He's lost everything.
If the story is told in a totally different way, if it's told from Baron's perspective, you could almost make him the antagonist of that.
Right.
Not the hero necessarily, but the antagonist, the protagonist of the story.
He could have been the protagonist of the story.
Yeah, if you frame that movie a whole different way, if you take his journey, you eliminate all we know about Captain America and all these other heroes and kind of frame them differently from his perspective, he's the protagonist. He's the guy you root for in that story.
Right, he's the John Wick. He's out there seeking revenge for a grave injustice done to him. You know?
Yeah, a whole different than John's injustice, but not a whole different, but a little different level of injustice here. Yeah.
But it is the same thing.
Yes. You take something away from somebody and they want to get back at you. That's the story.
Right.
And sometimes rightfully so. People deserve justice. If somebody is wronged you,
nobody was held
accountable
accountable for the losses he suffered.
Yes. So there's a story there for Baron Zemo. Now, does he go about it the right way? Not necessarily, but maybe.
It could have been seen that way, yes. He is destroying evil Soviets also to get control of another person who, an evil Soviet guy.
A lot of evil Soviets.
He's doing his thing.
Yeah. But that's a good point. I mean, Baron Zemo is kind of the Andor
of the MCU.
That's
all by himself.
Yeah. But yeah, I think Andor is just not necessarily, again, should be what Star Wars becomes, but it's certainly something that Star Wars can be from time to time.
Right. It can't be that all the time, because then you lose that magic.
You lose, yeah.
But from time to time, I could definitely get behind a story told like Andor.
Yes.
Where you can see real people in the galaxy, that you see not everyone is squeaky clean.
Or filthy dirty.
All
right, well, that is all we got for you this time. So take to the comments below. Tell us what you thought of our little midweek ramble here. Tell us if you want more of these, because you never know when another light news day is going to come. And we don't want to just put out a video for the sake of putting out a video when there's no news.
And be on the lookout. There is a second video going to be coming today. Our first ever aggressive negotiations.
Yeah, I guess a little similar to this one, but a little more hostile. But all in good fun. Anyway, leave your comments below. Tell us what you think about this. Is Andor good for Star Wars? Is Andor bad for Star Wars? Whatever the case may be, again, leave your comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.